Hello all, hope you're doing well today. Today we're talking about the history and future of sport and public assembly facilities. This is chapter 1. So here we go. Today we're going to be talking about understanding how the Greeks and Romans used sport facilities for political and cultural ends, as well as having a historical understanding of how sport facilities have changed to accommodate changes in sport and spectating demands, and identify how sport facilities have evolved from multi-use to single-use and back to multi-use, and appreciate the history behind several major sport facilities, and also how facility trends have evolved over the years in the United States and internationally, and understand how and why politics, especially the Olympic movement, will continue to influence the sport facilities in the future. So what do you think is the oldest sport facility in existence? Does your answer depend on your definition of what constitutes a sport facility? Is seating required? Do you need a playing surface? What if the facility is only sometimes used for sports? This is a difficult question. The answer depends on your definition of sport facility. Arenas, stadiums, YMCAs, school gyms, fitness facilities, and bowling alleys can all be classified as sport facilities. Typically excluded from the definition of a sport facility are natural areas such as lakefront property where people might engage in a water-related sport, and open recreation areas such as golf courses. While a golf course is a self-contained sport facility, some might categorize it as a recreation facility that can be torn down quickly to be replaced by a business park. Thus, permanency could be a factor in defining a sport facility. However, any facility can be torn down and replaced by a business park. Over the past 20 years, numerous stadiums and arenas have been torn down and turned into parking lots. In fact, the parking lots at Citi Field and Turner Field include outlines of the former playing fields and markers where the bases once stood. Therefore, permanency might not be as important as other factors such as being enclosed, being able to control conduct in the facility, or having room for participants and spectators. For purposes of this text, a sport facility is defined as any enclosed facility built, installed, or established as a location where sports are played. The enclosure can be either natural or man-made. However, the enclosure has to be complete so that the facility is self-contained. The two sport facilities most frequently analyzed are stadiums and arenas. Stadiums are often defined as venues that contain a playing surface surrounded by spectator seating and are used primarily for outdoor sport events. Arenas are enclosed indoor structures with a large open space surrounded by a tier seating area. Since the seating area is tiered, the playing surface is located at the lowest point to provide the best line of sight. The Yankee store in Times Square, New York sells merchandise and tickets that benefit a stadium and team, but it is not classified as a sport facility. A bowling alley in Times Square, New York shows how elaborate even a smaller sport facility can be. Another equally important term is public assembly facility, or PAF. PAFs include sport facilities as well as other entertainment or non-entertainment facilities where large groups of people can gather. Typically, examples of PAFs are arenas or stadiums, theaters, and convention centers, such as the American Bank Center. All these types of facilities can host sport-related events. The text uses the term PAF as well as the term sport facility. No matter which term is used, sport facilities can be very fluid and change quickly. For example, over the past several years, we've seen football and baseball stadiums transformed into outdoor hockey rinks to host record crowds, and a women's professional basketball game was held at a major tennis stadium. Such conversions show that facilities can be craftily manipulated to meet the needs of the facility users. From ancient times to the present, sport facilities have been the hallmark or focal point of many cultures. Sport facilities have changed, but the changes are not as dramatic as they might seem. This table 1 that we'll see next highlights the timeline of facilities over several centuries. So you can see here the beginning of the recorded history between 8500 and 7000 BC. There really weren't any enclosed facilities. It was primarily natural resources as such. In the Neolithic period, you had in 8000 BC, there were houses and villages, and they used primarily a mud brick construction. But starting in 776 BC, you start to see stadiums come about, and that's when the first known sport complex happens. And 331 BC, the Olympic Stadium in ancient Greece, as one of the first representations of the modern facilities. And then in ancient Rome in 6 BC to AD 80, the Circus Maximus and Roman COLISEUM were used for chariot races and other major events. And then there are other stadiums that follow along, and now you're starting to see more of the mega facilities occur, such as the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where it's more of multi-use facility development. So to appreciate current and future issues involved in sport facility management, it's critical to understand how far the industry has progressed since ancient times. However, a review of some facts associated with Greek and Roman sport facilities suggests that we are still using some ancient strategies. In ancient Greece, sports were a form of worship. Olympia, one of the oldest religious centers in the Greek world, was a natural site for the origin of the Olympic Games. The games were part spectacle and part religious ceremony. The Greeks undertook a major religious festival honoring Zeus, and the festival held at Olympia was the biggest event in the world at the time. And people would travel to these events, and they were granted access through the territories that normally there would be some scuttlebutt and that sort of thing going on. The first known Olympic Games were held in 776 BC. They were subsequently held at the base of Mount Olympus every 4 years for almost 1,000 years. The original games may have consisted of only one event, such as a 200-yard foot race called the Stadion. The first winner was a cook named Coriobos. Although many Greeks believe that the Greeks competed nude, they actually wore shorts in the early games. In 720 BC, one athlete stripped off his trunks in an attempt to run faster. It worked. So others stripped off their clothes thereafter. The Olympics also hosted the first mixed martial arts event called Pankration. The event featured wrestling, boxing, and martial arts in which arm twisting and punching, kicking, breaking bones, and even strangulation were allowed. People came from near and far to participate and watch the games at Olympia. The throngs of people needed a place to gather. In other words, they needed a public assembly facility, or PAF. The original Olympic Stadium, built in Olympia in 776 BC, was an extension of an already existing religious sanctuary dedicated to Zeus. By combining the sanctuary and other buildings added over time, the facility formed the first known sport complex, complete with altars, a hostel for visitors built in the 4th century BC, and training facilities for wrestlers and boxers, a gymnasium with a covered track and facility called the Stadia, where the actual events took place. The Stadia was shaped like a U, built into the hillside with a massive sloping embankment on each side of the U that served as seating. On the fourth side, the natural slope of the hill was also used for seating. Athletes and umpires came into the stadium through their own entrances. There were multiple vaulted entrances for spectators, and the chief judges and the priestess sat in special stone seats. According to some, all women except for the priestess were banned as spectators. Others believe that only unmarried women were welcome to enter the stadium. Inside the stadium, the track was about 230 yards long and 35 yards wide. It was separated from the sloping embankments by a low stone parapet which ran an open stone water channel with basins at intervals. There was enough space for 20 people to run at one time. There was also enough space for kart races and chariot races. Sources show some discrepancy about what events were held in the Olympic Stadium and when they were held. Some evidence suggests that Olympic Games date back to a time before the actual stadium was built. In fact, various open fields and areas were used for religious sanctuaries. It seems logical that games were held in these places as part of the religious ceremonies. Other PAFs developed by the Greeks included theaters and hippodromes. Greek theaters had three main parts. The scene, or skene, was a painted backdrop. The orchestra was a circular area in front of the scene, and the actors performed on a narrow raised platform called the logion in front of the scene. Last, there was the COLISEUM for sitting. The COLISEUM was originally built from wood and later from stone, was semicircular and built around the orchestra. The COLISEUM was divided into two sections called the diosma, which included upper and lower seating tiers, and special seats were reserved for officials and priests. Examples of Greek stadiums can be seen in Epidaurus, where the stadium was built around 330 BC, Argos and Delphi. These theaters seated 14,000, 20,000, and 5,000 respectively. Many hippodromes were built around Greece. These facilities were for horse races as well as chariot races. There were originally open fields lined with raised banks of earth. There was no seating. Spectators stood for the races. Eventually, these rudimentary facilities evolved into huge stone facilities seating tens or even hundreds of thousands of spectators. The Hippodrome in Olympia lay south of the stadium in the open valley of Alpheus. The Roman Empire followed the Greek Empire as the dominant culture of its time. During the ancient Roman era, young people participated in sports such as wrestling, boxing, racing, and jumping. The Romans loved their sports, and the leaders leveraged this interest into a means to control their subjects for days on end. Some events lasted for several days with spectators eating and drinking themselves beyond traditional limits. Sounds familiar, right? It was hoped that the excited and tired subjects who had spent all their money would eventually return to their homes and not complain about the leadership because they had experienced such a wonderful event. To help effectuate these plans and meet the demands of those sports, the leaders needed large facilities such as the Roman COLISEUM and the CIRCUS MAXIMUS. And here you can see again it's called the pancration, where they used MMA, wrestling and boxing and martial arts, and they competed often to the death. So a little bit different than our times here. It is estimated that 50,000 people could enter the Colosseum, or the Flavian Amphitheater, which is commonly known. Because of its huge size, they could enter in this in about 15 minutes, owing to the ticketing system that was developed by the Romans. Before an event, a spectator would pick up a ticket, often made from pottery shards, and each ticket had a number that corresponded to one of the 78 entrance archways, which all had numbers above them. Tickets also had levels and seat numbers. Similar ticketing systems are still used to this day, believe it or not. You all have seen them. The Roman Colosseum, originally known as the Flavian Amphitheater, which was after the emperor that built it, Vespasian and Titus, both of the Flavian family. Construction began in AD 72 and was finished in AD 80, so it took about 8 years. The facility was funded through money taken from spoils after destroying Jerusalem in AD 68. When it was finished, the Colosseum stood 160 feet high with 4 stories of windows, arches, and columns. Each of the 3 exterior floors consisted of 80 arches, and visitors climbed sloping ramps to their seats and were seated according to sex and social class. Women slaves and the poor stood or sat on wooden benches in the 4th tier of seating. The reserved luxury seats were marble, and their bases were inscribed with the names of the senators and knights who occupied them. Vestal virgins, religious officials, soldiers, civilians, and boys with their tutors had special seating sections. A place of honor was given to the editor, who organized and paid for the games. And the emperor, who often paid for the games, had a special box, similar to our sky boxes today, for himself and his family. The Roman Colosseum, as Roman civilization rose, the need for PAFs rose with it. Most notable was the Roman Colosseum with its spectacles and gladiators. The Romans built their stadiums based on past structures. In some cases, as with amphitheaters, Rome simply renovated or rebuilt old Greek structures. In addition to the Roman Colosseum and the Roman amphitheaters, the Romans had the circus. The circus was the Roman version of a racetrack. It was the setting for chariot races and other events, both equestrian and non-equestrian. The most famous Roman circus was the Circus Maximus, built to emulate the Greek hippodrome and considered one of the architectural wonders of the ancient world. Constructed of wood in the 6th century BC, it was destroyed by fire twice and was subject to flooding. On at least 2 occasions, the stands collapsed, killing many people. And eventually, the Circus Maximus was rebuilt of stone and masonry. Historians have estimated the seating capacity of the circus as ranging from 150,000 to more than 300,000. It is assumed that the number of spectators surpassed seating capacity and that many observers stood for the duration of the events. Unlike other Roman PAFs, men and women could sit together at the circus. The circus also had skyboxes and reserved seating for the emperor, the senators, the knights, judges, and prize-awarding jury, and the financial backers for the various races. The track was 1/3 of a mile long and 150 yards wide. It was covered with earth and then a layer of sand. The sand allowed chariots to hold the track. It also protected the horses from injury and allowed water to drain off. Like today's racetracks, the track was a large oval. The hippodrome, an ancient Greek stadium, was designed for horse racing, especially chariot racing. Its Roman counterpart was called a circus, and it's best represented by the Circus Maximus, as we just mentioned. The typical hippodrome was dug into a hillside, and the excavated material used to construct an embankment for supporting seats on the opposite side. In shape, the hippodrome was oblong, with one end semicircular and the other square. It thus resembled a U with a closed top. Seats ran in tiers in the length of the arena and along the curve, while at the straight end, dignitaries occupied seats above the arena's offices. A low wall called a spina ran most of the length of the stadium and divided the course. The spina was decorated with monuments and had sculptures that could be tilted or removed to keep spectators involved or informed of the laps completed by the racers. Because as many as 10 chariots raced at one time, the breadth of the course was sometimes as much as 400 feet. The length was about 600 to 700 feet. Although facilities have changed significantly over the years, management and operations of facilities have remained somewhat stable. Just as there were different classes of seating in the Roman Colosseum, amphitheaters, and Circus Maximus, we have different classes of seating today. Just as important, people had reserved seats and advantageous positions in earlier eras. We have club seats and luxury suites today. The behind-the-scenes workings of an event are often beyond the knowledge of average facility patrons. Security, stagehands, and medical services are just a few examples of behind-the-scenes support services. In ancient times, there were also staff members whose job it was to keep things running smoothly. At the Colosseum, sailors were employed to work the enormous colored awnings used to shelter spectators from the hot sun. Archers took stations on catwalks above the crowd in order to shoot rowdy fans and resistant participants or animals that presented a threat to the audience as well. These differences have evolved over many years, led by the change in sport facility owners and providers. Initially, the government and churches were behind PAFs. As facilities have evolved, they focused more on generating profits, such as an evolution required a new way of thinking about building and running sport facilities. One example is the shift of concession sales from peanuts and Cracker Jack to sushi and five-star cuisine. And here you can see differences. Also, our modern parking concerns for the thousands of cars we have. Of course, gatherings happen out in the parking lots as well, and of the amount of food, the type of food, and the thousands of fans that are going to be entering the venues, as well as the environmental and the zoning, accessibility, and other legal issues that are associated with facility management today. The modern era for sport facilities started in the late 1860s. Baseball was one of the driving forces for larger sport facilities, especially when it came to generating revenue for fans. The first game was paid admission. A 3-game series pitting the best from New York City against the best from Brooklyn was held at Fashion Racecourse on Long Island in July 1858. Admission was 50 cents. This game showed that people would pay to watch baseball. In 1862, Union Grounds, the first enclosed ballpark, opened in Brooklyn. Because the facility was enclosed, everyone who wanted to watch had to pay. Union Grounds and other ballparks at that time were generally made of wood and often did not have outfield fences. Instead, there was a barrier at the end of the property to prevent freeloaders. Horse-drawn carriages and later cars were allowed to pull into the outfield so that paying fans could watch the game from their vehicles. Other spectators were allowed to sit on backless planks of wood. The Philadelphia Nationals built the Baker Bowl in 1887 and opened the season to an attendance of 14,500 fans. The bowl cost $80,000 to build, which 9 years later was the average yearly salary for a Major League Baseball player. That was in 1983. Thus, the initial drive for large stadiums were simple monetary gain. So, what do you think has fueled the phenomenal growth of new and renovated facilities since the 1980s? Is it the almighty dollar? Do you think this growth will continue in the near future, or is the building boom over? And I'm going to add something else in there. How has COVID changed the building boom, if you will? And with stadiums now exceeding $2 billion in costs, are they too expensive? Major soccer stadiums are not the only facilities being renovated or rebuilt to save money. This cost aspect is also seen in Olympic game facilities. Athens mounted a tremendous construction effort to prepare for the 2004 Olympic Games. The Olympic Stadium had to be refurbished and renovated. A couple years before the Games, a large percentage of the 23 facilities required to host the Games had yet to be built. The International Olympic Committee was concerned about the completion of the facilities and voiced a strong warning to Greece to hasten their construction efforts. In fact, construction was not completed until hours before the Games began. The Games budget was estimated to be $1.7 billion, with a large percentage of these funds dedicated to sport facilities. But it grew to more than $11.6 billion. In contrast, constructing all of the facilities necessary for the Australian Olympic Games in 2000 cost just over $3 billion. The required buildings included the 110,000-seat Stadium Australia, the 20,000-seat Sydney Superdome, the Sydney International Athletic Center, and several other aquatic, sailing, and shooting facilities. Beijing, China hosted the 2008 Olympic Games. It was estimated that 37 stadiums and arenas would be either built or renovated for the Games. The expected cost of completing all the required facilities was $3.4 billion. In addition, another $1.94 billion was supposed to be spent on ancillary facilities such as the Olympic Village, the Press Center, and Broadcasting Center. Costs spiraled to over $45 billion for Beijing's Summer Olympics in 2008. Costs rose to over $50 billion for the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi and $20 billion for Rio de Janeiro in 2016. A lack of control from government construction projects resulted in the local government in Pyeongchang, South Korea, footing a nearly $13 billion bill, up from the $7 billion originally projected to host the Games in 2018. The stunning cost to host the Games spooked at least 5 large cities from moving forward with bids for the 2022 Games. Candidates that pulled out include Oslo, Norway, Lucerne, Switzerland, Stockholm, Sweden, Almaty, Kazakhstan, and Munich, Germany. One of the issues for these games and all past and future Olympics is how to utilize the facilities after the Olympics have ended. Nobody wants the facilities to become white elephants, but there are significant financial issues associated with running facilities. For example, the Calgary Olympics in 1988 generated a $150 million profit, but the lasting legacy has been the facilities, which are still actively utilized. The Olympic Oval is one of the fastest speed skating tracks in the world and is used as a training center. The Calgary facilities have fared well because they were close to downtown and there was a need for the facilities. The facilities developed for the Vancouver Games in 2010 were also designed or renovated to help save costs. The main ice hockey rink, Rogers Arena, was a pre-existing hockey rink used by the Vancouver Canucks. It was a narrower NHL-sized ice rink measuring 200 by 85 feet, which was 4 meters narrower than traditional Olympic hockey facilities because it didn't have to expand the ice. The facility could be used again for its intended purpose, which saved more than $10 million in renovation. Other past Olympic sites have not been as lucky. In fact, most of the facilities utilized for the Athens Olympic Games have fallen to disuse, and some have become encampments for traveling gypsies. 1 year after the Beijing Olympic Games, the iconic Bird's Nest Stadium served no real purpose. It has no home team, but it has held several concerts. A number of visitors pay 50 yuan, around $7, to picnic in the stands and take pictures. An amusement park was added to one corner, and the stadium generated $38 million in revenue during the first year and a half after the games. 70% of those funds came from the tourists. But by December 2009, the number of tourists declined from a high of 50,000 per day to around 10,000 per day. The goal of the Beijing Olympic Games was to prove to the world that China could host the games. It did, and it was successful. Project 119 was named for the number of gold medals that the Chinese wanted to win when the games came to China. China somewhat succeeded on this ambitious front as well. Its athletes won 100 medals, including 51 gold medals. However, even with all these issues, China was able to save money and valuable real estate. 8 of the 31 venues were temporary. Thus, the baseball diamond is now a mall. Greece might wish it had built more temporary facilities. Some of the Greek facilities have fallen into complete disrepair, and other elements are trash dumps. Even though it is in horrible shape, the Greek government has reportedly spent close to $1 billion to maintain facilities that are basically unused. Heeding these lessons, the facilities for the London Olympics was built to be later reduced to a more manageable scale. The 80,000-seat Olympic Stadium was reduced to a 54,000-seat home for West Ham United Football Club. The basketball arena was a temporary structure that was torn down after the games. Basketball is not as popular in England as it is in the United States, and the dismantled building and the floor were on the market for $3.3 million. The 3,000 units of the Athletes' Village were built without kitchens because food was provided to the athletes. This allowed more athletes to sleep in each unit. After the games, the kitchens were added to each unit, which were then sold to create the new neighborhood known as the East Village. Last, the 17,500-seat aquatic center was reduced to a more manageable 2,500-seat swimming facility. As noted earlier, political and religious concerns helped foster construction of the Roman COLISEUM and CIRCUS MAXIMUS. The idea was that if citizens were busy enjoying sport and other events, they might be more content, would not try to overthrow the government. It sounds like after the protests today that maybe we need to add more sport back in. People obviously need some things to do. Modern facilities are often built with the same political goals in mind. Most voters would be hard-pressed to find an elected official who wants to be known as the politician who lost a professional team. Elected officials often go out of their way to provide any assistance possible to attract or retain a professional team. Debacles involve poor political planning are numerous. Due to some scandals, various voter-assisted Associated groups have aggressively advocated for better voter knowledge about the financial benefits or possible lack thereof for various proposed facility referendums. The recent economic turmoil has voters rallying against spending their tax dollars on sport facilities. So any new referendums for the next several years will face significant voter scrutiny and a demand for more accountability. For example, the shenanigans associated with government funding for the Miami Marlins Stadium that opened in 2012 included a public funding plan that could eventually cost Miami-Dade County $2.4 billion, led to significant litigation, contributed to the ouster of several local politicians, and triggered a Securities and Exchange Commission investigation. The backlash against public funds also resulted in voters in San Diego and St. Louis opting not to fund stadiums to the amounts requested by team owners. The result was these cities losing their teams. As you know, the LA Raiders are now housed in Las Vegas. So I guess it's the Las Vegas Raiders now. Anyway, these examples highlight why there have been significant battles over almost every vote to build a stadium or arena for the primary benefit of a private business owner. Although some facilities are financed entirely with private funds, most are built with a majority of public funds. Public funds are utilized because of the perceived benefit that a stadium and its major tenant team will provide this city or region. The true benefit is hard to quantify, but arguments on both sides are possible regarding whether a stadium or arena provides a benefit or whether people are willing to invest several dollars a month in extra taxes in order to be able to talk about the local team around the water cooler at work. Although public funding was a popular trend in the 1990s, a poor economy at the start of the 21st century curtailed some projects. Other projects have faced the voters' wrath. Some projects, such as the newer stadium for the New York Jets and Giants, included a significant private contribution to the total proposed construction costs. The teams initially indicated that they would contribute a total of $800 million toward the $1.5 billion price tag for the stadium. However, as construction progressed, each team contributed $650 million to the new stadium. Chapter 5 is going to talk a little bit more about the detailed analysis of political issues. However, it is necessary to acknowledge the political issue here because PAFs have for centuries been closely tied with politics. Any effort to analyze PAFs without examining the political influence associated with how facilities are built, funded, and maintained fails to recognize the historical social significance these facilities have had. Political entities do not build facilities just to placate the masses. Every issue, from bond issuance and tax abatements through safety inspection and zoning or nuisance debates, intertwines the facility and various government entities. These and other overlaps are discussed throughout the book. It is important to understand from the beginning, without government support, sport facilities as we have them today would not exist. Other trends besides political shifts include technological and sport-related changes. Technological shifts range from new rigging systems to support large weights, such as scoreboards, to stadium fields on rollers to allow for the use of natural grass in dome stadiums. In favorable weather, the grass can be rolled outside. One of the most current trends in technology involves applications or apps that get fans more involved with the event. If stadiums and arenas didn't have the latest technologies, fans would stay home to watch games on their large screen TVs and have access to all their gadgets. The Major League Soccer franchise Sporting Kansas City opened a new soccer stadium in 2011. One of the $200 million construction cost, $6 million went toward a high-density wireless network that has 220 miles of fiber, which is 7 times the norm for a stadium of its size. The high-tech environment allows almost 25% of fans, compared with an average of 10% of the most NFL stadiums, to use the team's supplied apps called Euphoria. The app allows fans to customize their watching experience and engage with other fans electronically. As of spring 2019, Euphoria has been downloaded 10,000 times. New technology is also making facilities more efficient and effective. For example, over the years, we've learned that frequent grass mowing is better for grass fields. This has led some facilities, such as the All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club in Wimbledon, London, England, to mow the grass courts sometimes twice a day. Another example is growing grass where conditions have changed. Some stadiums, such as Lambeau Field, have brought in giant grow lights operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to help the grass grow. New surfaces are being developed as well, which can harness the energy of people walking on concourse surfaces around an arena or stadium. In the near future, a facility could be lit just by people walking around. One futuristic example is the Sapporo Dome in Japan, in which the retractable field concept, where fields on rollers can be moved outside a dome stadium to grow grass better, was improved by moving the 8,300-ton field using pneumatics or air pressure to push the field out in around 5 hours. Sport-related changes can be seen with new sports. Extreme sports are changing numerous sport and recreation facilities. Skateboard and paintball parks were being built in record numbers through the mid-2000s. To help keep kids off city buildings and out of dangerous locations. But similar to other facility fads, a large number of these facilities have closed. Other facilities that are not traditionally considered sport facilities, such as bridges, can become havens for base jumpers and other extreme sport enthusiasts. Such usage can generate significant liability and safety trends that facility managers need to carefully consider and act on. Furthermore, new sports are being created and can grow overnight. When the first edition of this text came out, there was no pickleball or esports, and now there are specialized facilities for these sports. Facilities for esports are not traditional sports facilities, but are closer to theaters. There are only a few dedicated esports facilities in North America. The largest one is the Esports Stadium of Arlington, Texas, which is a 100,000 square foot dedicated facility which opened in 2019. There are other major esport facilities such as the Gaming Stadium in British Columbia, Canada, and Esports Arena Las Vegas at the Luxor Hotel, the Blizzard E Stadium, which seats up to 250 fans in Taipei. The Las Vegas facility is a 30,000 square foot multi-level arena designed to host every form of competitive gaming, from daily play to high-stakes esports tournaments, and features a competition stage, a 50-foot LED video wall, telescopic seating, PC and console gaming stations, and a network TV quality production studio. Other upgrades requested by fans include better mobile reception, better parking and transportation options, heated seats, greater access to referee commentary and match analysis, electronic access for ease of entry, and a blocking system that blocks phone calls during a game. These fans also felt that a facility's design can make it iconic, and that the length of lines for the restroom has the most negative effect on a fan's experience. So you can see in the survey in 2012, there were 2,000 sport fans in England, and they were looking at what the public would like to see in future sport facilities. Top answers were more comfortable and spacious seating, about 49%, better transportation options, about 32%, better crowd modeling to help in crowd movement, 32%, and better technology to show replays from different angles, 30%, and safety design standing room for European soccer, about 27%. So what would you want in a modern sport facility and why? And I'd also ask, how is that facility funded? How do you fund those changes, those types of things? So sports facilities have undergone significant changes over time, especially over the past 2 centuries. The Greeks and Romans intertwined politics and religion to build large public facilities to placate the masses. These types of facilities have evolved over the years into architectural and mechanical marvels. Today's PAFs serve as economic catalysts for growth to promote economic, geopolitical, and local political ends. Although this chapter gives more attention to the larger facilities, smaller facilities have also undergone changes that have made them more marketable and economically viable. This growth will undoubtedly continue in the future, and the same trends seen in the growth of facilities in the United States will feature more prominently around the world. In fact, recent Olympic and World Cup facilities show that the world is caught up with the U.S. and producing the best facilities for the needs of current teams and fans. And that is all we have for today, guys. I look forward to talking with you again next time. Y'all have a great day.